We welcome George Stoya III from Sooner Scoop. And the reason we're talking to George about this Alamo Bowl between Oklahoma and Arizona, Thursday is a big day in college football for a current Big 12 team and a future SEC team, and for a current Big 12 team and a future Big 12 team. So in the Pop-Tarts Bowl in Orlando, it's Avery Johnson Day. Happy Avery Johnson Day to the Kansas State fans. And then you roll into the Alamo Bowl where it is Jackson Arnold Day for the Oklahoma fans. The 5-star getting his, well, this is not his first start. This will be his second start. But this is the dawn of the Jackson Arnold era of Oklahoma football, George.
Yeah, people are really excited. I mean, it went from, OU fans kind of being disappointed about not getting a New Year's Six bowl, not being able to play in one of those bigger bowl games. And all of a sudden, there is a ton of excitement because of Jackson Arnold. And you also add in the fact that they have a new play caller in Seth Luttrell as the new offensive coordinator, along with Joe John Finley as the co-offensive coordinator. Everyone's kind of curious, what is this offense going to look like without Dillon Gabriel, without Jeff Lebby? And as Jackson Arnold gets going into the SEC, Oklahoma wants him to have a good game. So what's the game plan look like? Are they going to let him loose? Are they going to let him try and air it out, build some confidence as they do head into the SEC next year?
Yeah, the scheme itself is very interesting. I'm assuming they'll run the same offense they ran all year, just with Luttrell calling it. But Luttrell's an air raid guy, which is different from the offense that Lebby was running. Everybody thinks the Bryles offense and the air raid offense are the same. They're not. But there are some commonalities that somebody who's been trained in both can easily call one or the other. And then Joe John Finley has been trained in that Bryles offense, the one that Lebby ran. I'm fascinated to see it. And it feels like for both teams, for Arizona and for Oklahoma, most of the major contributors are there other than Dillon Gabriel.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Oklahoma, they've had a couple opt-outs, but not a ton. It's really on the offensive line that you're going to see some new names just because they have a couple guys declaring for the draft. But they also have, a couple super seniors, McCade Matower, Walter Rouse, expected to play in this game. So other than that, Oklahoma's got a lot of guys playing. You look on the defensive side of the ball, I expect them to have every single starter playing in this game on defense. And so, and then Arizona, they've had very few opt-outs. So I think that this could end up being one of the better bowl games of the bowl season, just because I think both teams also are pretty motivated. Arizona, I think they've only won 10 games 3 times in their school history. If they could go out and win, against Oklahoma, a team that they really respect, I think it would mean a lot for their program moving forward. And then on the flip side, again, Oklahoma, I think reaching 11 games and having that momentum going into the SEC would be massive for them. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, Andy, because OU's had a lot of excitement. You got Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, both announced they're coming back next year, which they feel really good about. But then again, all eyes are on Jackson Arnold. What does he look like? And I think Oklahoma, what they don't want is the narrative to be all offseason, hey, is Jackson Arnold really the guy? And so you don't want to have that type of performance on Thursday.
Well, tell the people about Jackson Arnold, because this is a guy that Oklahoma fans have been excited about for basically 2.5 years now.
Yeah, from Denton Guyer High School, 5-star kid, one of the top quarterbacks. Some considered him the top quarterback in the 2023 class. Really kind of a quiet kid, but man, he can sling it. The ball comes out differently when he throws it. And we've seen him at times this year in mop-up duty or, in the BYU game when he had to come in for an injured Dillon Gabriel, and he played really well. He's a guy that doesn't have a ton of experience, still really young. He can move. He can really move in the pocket. He's a runner. He's a guy that can take off. I think it was in the spring game. He ran for like a 70-yard touchdown on one of his first plays in the spring game. So he's somebody who can scramble, kind of like Dillon Gabriel. So there's a lot of people with high expectations for him, fair or not. And again, he's got the talent. We'll see what the decision-making looks like in this game, but you'll see him throw the ball deep. That's where his specialty is for sure. And again, that's kind of where it's going to be interesting. Do they let him loose in this game? And again, how much do they run him? That became a huge part of Oklahoma's game, is the quarterback run game. Do they risk running him? The last thing you really want is to get injured in this game. Davis Bevel, who just entered the transfer portal, he's going to play in the game. He will be the backup, but going to the next year, no one really knows who's going to be Jackson Arnold's backup. There's been some talk about maybe trying to get a portal quarterback if they can. They've got Michael Hawkins and Brendan Zerberg, 2 freshmen coming in, but I think that they're going to be kind of cautious with Jackson in this game in terms of running him too much.
I want to tell you about Prize Picks, and I'll tell you about how I am looking at the Alamo Bowl based on what I've done on Prize Picks. So first of all, you need to sign up for Prize Picks. Download that app. Use the referral code Andy. They will match your first deposit up to $100. It is the most fun daily fantasy platform in America, and you can use college football, NBA, NFL, you name it. So for the college football squares that they've got them out for the bowl games that are coming up. They've got a Noah Fafita and Jackson Arnold passing yardage square for each player. Now, here's how it works. You pick at least 2 squares. You can pick more than 2. And you decide if the player is going to have more or less than this yardage total or a rebound total or a point total, you name it. So in this particular case, I am going for, I want a shootout. I don't like to root against people. I like to root for people. So I am rooting for a shootout in the Alamo Bowl. So Noah Fafita, Arizona's quarterback, his number is 306.5 yards. He's been really good down the stretch. This is one of the hottest teams in America. So I'm saying more than 306.5 for Noah Fafita. Jackson Arnold, the former 5-star recruit, his era is dawning here at Oklahoma. His number is 248.5. So I'm saying more than that for him. Now, if you want to go into the playoff, they've got some picks for the playoff already. Jalen Milroe, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix, Quinn Ewers, all their numbers already up there. So you can put those in. But you can also go for the games that are being played on Wednesday, Thursday. Those are all out there. NBA games, NFL games, all kinds of fun stuff out there. They had a great Christmas bonus where if Kevin Durant scored 1 point, you won your square. So Prize Picks always doing cool stuff like that. So download the Prize Picks app, use the referral code Andy, and they will match your first deposit up to $100. Well, and you mentioned, keeping him healthy, having something to kind of hang your hat on as you go into next year. Oklahoma fans just saw their first SEC schedule in the past couple of weeks. Did it start to feel more real that's where it's going? I mean, because when you look at it, like you're thinking about ending a season against Alabama and LSU, it's a completely different world starting basically after Thursday.
Yeah, and you look at their schedule, I think they play like 4 or 5 teams that are ranked in the top 15 right now. They have to go to Missouri, they have to go to Ole Miss, 2 programs that seem to be trending in the right direction. Obviously had great seasons this year. And then you mentioned it, you get Alabama at home, and then you turn around and go to Baton Rouge to play LSU. And so it's becoming very real for Oklahoma. And again, that's why there's a large part of the fan base that feels like this is a big game against Arizona, because again, they want to have some momentum heading into the SEC. They just signed a top 10 class with 27 new guys. They've gone out and they've gotten several guys in the portal. They've also lost several key pieces in the portal. When you talk about Caden Green, the starting left guard, going to Missouri. So, I think that it's getting very, very real very quickly for Oklahoma. And you look at next season and the way it lines up, they like how the buys kind of dropped in there at 2 weeks. I think they come after Texas, or maybe the week before Texas, and then I think before Ole Miss. And so, and then you have the Maine game. They play Maine, which is basically a bye before they play Alabama. So
they are between Auburn and Texas.
Yeah,
and between Missouri and Alabama. So that is about
they've worked out perfect.
Yeah,
it worked out perfect. And so again, the schedule's really tough, but it lines up nicely. I mean, there's some people that think Oklahoma could be 10-0, heading into those final 2 weeks, with Alabama and LSU being maybe the 2 most difficult games. I'm really interested to see what Ole Miss looks like. That's going to be a really tough game. And then they go to Auburn for their first ever SEC road game.
That's the one, because that place, when it's raw, and they're going to be so excited for Oklahoma. Remember the last time somebody played at Auburn, Alabama needed the miracle of all miracles to win. But and they're going to be better because Hugh Freeze is not going to let them sort of fester. They're going to be active in the portal and probably a much better roster than you saw this year. So that's all very exciting. But this game in the Alamo Bowl is exciting. Arizona was so good at the end of the season. They have almost it feels like there's so much momentum. I think Jed Fish was a kind of a hot name on the coaching carousel, but he's staying. And it really feels like they have some continuity coming into this game too.
Yeah, and they're one of those programs, Andy, that's going to be interesting to see what they do in the Big 12, because I think there's a handful of these new teams, Utah as well, Arizona State, that if they can get things heading in the right direction, they can compete in the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to be wide open, and Jed Fish has done a really good job with Arizona. They're one of the hottest teams in the country right now. I think they've won 6 in a row. They've done a really nice job. Their defense is playing well. Their young quarterback has played really well. And so that's why this game's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be a defensive battle, Andy, because Arizona's defense has been really solid this year. Oklahoma's got a true freshman quarterback playing. They've got some holes to fill on the offensive line. And then on the flip side, Oklahoma's entire starting defense with several super seniors, guys that want to go out the right way, are going to be playing in this game. They didn't have a ton of opt-outs on the defensive side of the football, and you get Danny Stutzman back, who's healthy now, Billy Bowman as well, Gentry Williams at corner. I think this could be a real defensive football game, despite some people thinking it might be a shootout.
Well, I mean, they got to get some pressure on Noah Fafita, who has not gotten pressured a ton this year in the Pac-12, and he's got some reliable T-Mac and Jacob Cowing. He got very reliable receivers. So, yeah, I think it'll be fun, but I think you're right. Both quarterbacks may be stressed in ways that they haven't been stressed yet. So very excited about that. I'm sure it's been mentioned quite a bit this week among both fan bases that last year's Alamo Bowl, Texas versus Washington, is a playoff game this year. I don't know about you, but with a 12-team playoff coming, I could very easily see this being a playoff game next year.
Definitely. I mean, again, you look at the direction of both these programs right now. Oklahoma feels like it's got a lot of momentum heading into next year. And when you talk about expanding the playoff to 12 teams and Oklahoma having that difficult schedule, they could go 10-2 next year and sneak in. There's a lot of people this year that felt they should have got a New Year's Six bowl. So all of a sudden, if they go 10-2 next year with the type of schedule that they have, they could easily be one of the 12 teams. And then again, you look at Arizona and the new Big 12, if they keep trending in this direction, they could easily win 9, 10, 11 games next year. And all of a sudden, they're playing in the playoffs. So I think that it very well could be a future playoff game. And obviously, Texas and Washington, I think everybody kind of saw it last year in that Alamo Bowl game. It was a great game. And both teams that had a lot of talent. You had Penix, you had Ewers, and now all of a sudden, both those teams are competing for possibly a national championship. It's kind of crazy to think about.
Well, okay, so now that we've had some time and the season's cooled off and kind of know where things stand going into next season, how does everybody feel about Brent Venables after year 2 as a head coach? Because that was the concern after year 1, and then going into this season was, okay, are they going to be SEC ready? How's he going to evolve as a game day coach? Will he be the guy? How does everybody feel about that now?
I think fans are confident in him. Look, I think that they made a lot of improvements this past year. You look at the 2 games that they did lose, Oklahoma State and Kansas, both of them were kind of fluky games in the sense that Kansas, you had the bad weather. They didn't play very well on offense. Same with the Oklahoma State game. They didn't play very well on offense. And Jeff Levy kind of became the scapegoat for Oklahoma. He's now at Mississippi State. And you look at the defensive improvement analytically, they've made huge strides on that side of the ball. And then you look at Oklahoma offensively, they're still bringing in talent. There's a lot of faith in Seth Luttrell as the new offensive play caller and maybe slowing things down, running more of the air raid, a guy that likes to run the football, which Oklahoma wasn't great at times this year, and then Jackson Arnold. So I think that there's a lot of hope that Brent Venables does have this thing heading in the right direction. And I think part of that, Andy, too, is you look at this recruiting class, the guys they're bringing in, number 8 right now on the On3 team rankings, they're bringing in the best defensive line class they've had since 2006 when they had Gerald McCoy, Jeremy Beal, guys that went on to play for the national championship in 2008 against your Gators, Andy. I mean, that's what we're talking about, is they're bringing in a defensive line class, which they have to have in the SEC to compete. And so I think that on top of Brent kind of figuring out the game day management, how to manage a game this year, on top of bringing in some of those key players for the SEC, has people really excited for what can come in 2024.
Yeah, David Stone, the headliner of that bunch, and from Oklahoma. And it's interesting because there was a quote, I think it was Barry Switzer, and I believe he said it back in 2013. And it was something to the tune of, they haven't had a Gerald McCoy or a Tommy Harris squatting down in the middle in a long time. And Oklahoma, 10 years later, still hasn't had that. And it feels like they're finally about to get that again.
Yeah, no, and even this last year, I think they had, 4 or 5 guys over 300 pounds on the defensive line. That's what they want. And they went out and they recruited several guys this last year. You talk about Jaden Jackson, David Stone's teammate from IMG Academy. He's another guy. He's out practicing with the team right now for bowl practices, which is a new NCAA rule, along with Nigel Smith, another guy, 4-star guy from Melissa, Texas, on the defensive line. I mean, they signed 5 guys on the defensive line that are 4 stars or higher. They haven't been able to do that, like I said, since 2006. Danny Okoye from Tulsa, Oklahoma, homeschooled kid. They think that he can be a freak coming off the edge. So they feel really, really good about that defensive line class. And I think they're going to be still busy in the transfer portal going after some of these veteran and experienced defensive linemen. So again, it feels like they're trending in the right direction in terms of having the right personnel to compete in the SEC, because that's where the difference is. Those games really, truly are won in the trenches in the SEC. And you look at these teams, Alabama's and Georgia's, they get those guys every year, right? Yep. And so I think that Oklahoma starting to trend and get some of those guys is really going to benefit them. We'll see how many of those guys are ready to play in 2024. But if they stick with the program and they develop, there's a lot of belief that those guys can be really impactful for this program moving forward.
Now, speaking of good linemen, this is a guy who's opted out and isn't going to be playing in this game or at Oklahoma in the future. But I want you to tell the draftniks, the people who maybe are holding out hope that their NFL team is going to get some help on the offensive line. Tell them a little about Tyler Guyton, because I have a feeling that's a name you're going to hear a lot in the next 4 months.
Super talented. I mean, a kid that, he started his career as a tight end at TCU, ends up transferring to Oklahoma, moves to offensive tackle. And is just super athletic. I think he still needs to work on his motor at times, but he was unbelievable in pass protection this year. Really a big guy, can play left or right tackle. I think he's probably a future left tackle in the NFL, but this is a guy that's going to test extremely well. I think he's already projected to be a first-round pick. I think he's going to knock the combine out of the park, as well as his pro day, and all of a sudden he's going to be being talked about a top 15, maybe a top 10 type pick, because he has the size, he has the athletic ability, and so I think he's going to be a guy. He ended up not playing the last couple games because he got hurt, and they actually had to play redshirt freshman Jacob Sexton, who's done really well. But this is a guy that's developed under Bill Beanebaugh, one of the best in the country, and a guy that I think some NFL team is going to be really happy to get.
Yeah, he's going to be the guy we're talking about after. Like Anthony Richardson last year was that guy. Tyler Guyton will be that guy this year. I'm very excited to see that, because he can also, he can play. It's not like last year with Richardson where, okay, he was 6-6 as a starter, but this guy could play against really good competition, and then he's going to test off the chart. So I can't wait to see it. George, enjoy San Antonio. Enjoy what might be the best bowl game outside the playoff.
I know it's going to be super exciting. I love San Antonio, the Riverwalk, lots of good food, lots of good drinks and stuff. So it'll be a fun time. And again, like you said, I think it's going to be a really good football game. It's not like a couple years ago when Oklahoma was here and played Oregon, who had like 30 guys opting out, and there was coaching changes, and Bob Stoops was the interim head coach. I think this one's going to be a little bit different.
Very different, and time to reflect. I'm glad you mentioned that. Before I let you go, let's reflect on that, because you're right. They're back in the same place they were 2 years ago, which is what happened when Lincoln Riley left. If you could go to an Oklahoma fan 2 years ago as they were preparing to watch that Alamo Bowl and thinking, oh, Lord, what is going on? What are we going to do? How's this going to work out? How much do you think they'd be smiling if you told them how things worked out in Norman and in Los Angeles?
Oh, I think they'd be ecstatic. I mean, you look at what's going on with USC. It's a dumpster fire right now. Now, I still think Lincoln will be able to figure out something there and win some more football games, but they're heading into the Big Ten kind of as a disaster right now. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Whereas Oklahoma, they feel really good about the direction they're heading, and we all get it. It's going to be really tough, but what Brent Venables has been able to do in the last 2 years, whether it's rebuilding this roster or just growing as a head coach himself, it feels like they're doing all the right things. So again, we'll see if it plays out. It doesn't always play out that way. But yeah, I think Oklahoma fans, especially after last year, Andy, there's a lot of question marks. That go 6-7, first losing season since 1998. To be able to turn it around this year, and there's still some disappointment Look,
Yeah.
they feel like they should have beat OSU and Kansas this year and should be in the playoff right now. But they didn't. But they still, got 10 wins, could get 11, and we're on the cusp of really making the Big 12 championship game despite those two losses. So I think that Oklahoma fans, looking back 2 years ago, are pretty happy with the way things are going, and also they enjoy watching what's happening over in Los Angeles.
I'm sure they do. Schadenfreude, I believe, is the word. So, George, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.